Hi guys, it's great to have you back. I am here again and I'm going to talk today about trauma. We've all experienced it, I believe, in some way, whether it was a lot or maybe just a little. Let me get down to what I usually do and give you the Webster's version of trauma. It's the response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope, causes feelings of helplessness, diminishes their sense of self, and their ability to feel the full range of emotions and experiences. Much like addiction, it does not discriminate, and it's pervasive throughout the world. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about my trauma, and I don't want to say what made me become an addict, but it's definitely what triggered my addiction in me, big time. And it happened on September 16th, 2012. So I'll go back a little bit. All of these events that I'm about to talk about, happened directly before my first time trying heroin and before I was homeless and before all that, like directly before. So September 1st, 2012, I had my beautiful son, Alan Henry Gardner, and this is him. He's gorgeous. I don't know if you can see him. Absolutely gorgeous. Loved him. He's such a beautiful baby. Perfect pregnancy. It was a crazy delivery because my water broke at home in the bathtub, and we lived in Pennsylvania, but our hospital that we chose to deliver at was Christiana Hospital all the way in Delaware. So I started crowning in the car, and of course my fiance is going like 110, and I'm like, slow down, you're gonna kill us. But then at the same time I'm like, hurry up, because I'm in such pain. We get in the elevator, and we get up to where I'm going to deliver, and the doctor's washing his hands, and while he's washing his hands I can feel the baby coming out, and the two nurses are just standing there. My fiance's standing there, and he's holding our 1-year-old daughter, Remy, who was 1 at the time. And so I'm like, no one's gonna catch this baby. And I just put my hands down, I pull him up on my chest. So yes, I delivered Alan Henry Gardner, which also made him very special to me. But he was our third child, our second son, and everything was fine after delivery. LabCorp, who did my labs, they lost my results for the group strep B test, the one that you do like late in your pregnancy. And so the nurses or the doctors made a decision to keep us an extra day just to keep an eye on them, because I guess in case I passed group strep B to him, which at the time, I didn't know this at the time, but now looking back, they should have just given him antibiotics if they, had any thought of maybe, this could happen, or he could catch it anyway. He went home with us 4 days after he was born, and he was fine. He was breastfeeding just fine, and sleeping and doing everything he was supposed to be doing. He was a little tiny, but all my babies were pretty tiny. He actually stayed in the full 40 weeks. My other children didn't. So, he was no NICU. He was straight home, and he was fine. The morning of September 16th, 2012, very early in the morning, it was about 2 a.m., I breastfed him, and everything was fine. And I laid him in the bed next to me because I would just sometimes fall asleep breastfeeding. How it is if you're a breastfeeding mother. You're exhausted, and, there's usually not a problem. So I woke up after that, I believe around 7 or 8. And I thought, it's really weird that he didn't wake me up. So he was sleeping to the right of me. I was on my back, and I looked down, and he was on his back, and his head was turned facing away from me. And they say a mother knows things, and I just knew something wasn't right. I grabbed his chin and I moved it so he was facing straight up, and he had a little blood coming from his nose and foam coming from his mouth, and he wasn't really blue. He just wasn't like, he didn't have that warm color. He was almost white, I guess. So immediately I just called for Chris, my fiance, and I said, Alan's not breathing, help me. My God, Alan's not breathing. And I stood up and jumped off the bed, and Chris immediately just scooped him up. And I called 911, and 911 said, put him on the floor on a flat surface so we can tell you how to use CPR. And Chris started to put him on the floor. I said, no, I don't want him on the floor. I didn't want him on the floor. At this point, I knew he was gone. But what do you do? Like, I don't know. What do you do? I didn't want to just give up. I don't know how long he had been gone. So, Chris did CPR on the phone with 911. And after a couple minutes, he said, I can't do it anymore. I just can't. He knew it wasn't working. And he gave the phone to me. And they told me how to do CPR. And I was doing it. And, nothing was happening. The ambulance finally got there. I think it took them like 16 minutes. We were like, what in the world? Like, there's right down the street. Anyway, the ambulance got there, and the driver, one of the EMTs, came in, and he just shook his head at me, and I yelled at him, are you going to take him to the hospital? Can you please take him to the hospital? And he just shook his head. He said, we're not going to take him to the hospital. He's gone, ma'am. That was, I don't even have words. I don't have words. Still, years later, and I don't have words for what that did to me that day. A deep hole in my heart. And at that moment, I just didn't know how I could go on. And actually, what follows is what added to that trauma. That trauma compounded and became substantially worse. It was horrible. So after that, I was in a daze, just going through the motions, and I had 2 other kids that I had to, go on for. So immediately after that, the police came, and for some reason, immediately they declared it a crime scene. I don't know why. I hadn't crushed him. I hadn't rolled over on him. There were no bruises. There was no sign of anything that could have made them. It's still unbeknownst to me why they declared it a crime scene. They did. The medical examiner came out and had me reenact where me and Chris were laying and how we found the baby, and and they took pictures of the house, and then that was a Sunday. The next day, we got a knock on the door, and it was Delaware County homicide detectives. And I was just, I was beyond shocked. I'm like, what are you doing at my door? First of all, I told the police everything again and over again and over again until I couldn't even speak anymore. Until I was blue in the face and tears running down. Tears were dried up. I told them so many times what had happened. And they ask you again and again, and they isolate you and ask you again and see if your story changes. I get it because people do horrible things to their kids. So I get it. I understood that. But then for the next day, for the homicide detectives to be at my door, and they said, we want you to come down the station and answer a few questions. And I said, I answered every question that I possibly could. I told the police everything. I don't understand why you guys are here. And he proceeded to say, and I quote, well, ma'am, this is America, not Somalia. Babies just don't die like that. I screamed at him. I said, you might want to check your facts, because it happens every day in America. And furthermore, I didn't do anything to cause my baby's death. I don't want to get into too much detail of what happened because the details are just, they're horrible, they're sad, they're gut-wrenching, but I will tell you everything that happened. From there I asked my mother, who was there with me, to take my two children take them away to my grandmother's house, because I didn't want them, the homicide detectives were not going away. And when they heard me say that, they said, no, these kids aren't going anywhere, we're calling CPS is taking them. And that just, oh my God, it was just like, why aren't you calling CPS on me? My son just died. I told him my son just died. I said, I don't feel well. And he said, oh, you're sick? And I said, yeah, my son just died, I'm horribly sick. And he said, is it just because you haven't had your hit this morning? And now I knew about drugs and things, but, before this, I've never really abused drugs. When I was 21, I might have done coke in a bar a couple weekends, but nothing like that. I've never done heroin or anything like that. And I was just shocked. I was, they had in their mind what happened. And they made their mind up before they even got there, before they even knew us, talked to us, and saw us. So anyway, CPS came, and CPS said, this is just what we always do, is customary. We're going to take the kids out of your custody until toxicology comes back on Alan. Toxicology can take up to 6 months. Now, we got the pre-autopsy records back, and they said there was no blunt trauma, there was no bruising, there was no suffocation. It was just a natural death. It's horrible to say natural death because, 16-day-old babies shouldn't just die naturally, but, anyway, thank God my grandmother was able to take the kids, and we had to have supervised visitations with them for 6 months until that toxicology came back. And when the toxicology report came back, of course, it was just sepsis. We didn't get an I'm sorry, or, we made a mistake, or any of that. All that during that time, we were trying to get our kids back, because it's horrible to lose a son. He was dead, and then the state comes and takes your children out of your house, the only thing that was keeping me alive, literally, and they take them. And we got a lawyer who was amazing, and she finally got the kids back in her house, but still, they were trying to persecute me for co-sleeping. And, CYS came, once a week to try and preach to me about co-sleeping and how the dangers of co-sleeping, Well, my lawyer was, fortunately, like a feminist, hippie, breastfeeding type, and she said no, she co-slept with all her kids, and there's so many women who co-sleep, and this doesn't happen. It's not, co-sleeping was not the issue. This mother did not kill her baby, or did not lead to her baby's death in any way, and she was amazing. Our lawyer, Jake. She was just awesome. So, anyway, we got the kids back, and they didn't even apologize. But, we got the autopsy reports and the toxicology reports that just said sepsis, and sepsis is just blood poisoning, just generic. We don't know. We still don't know to this day. I still don't have closure of how he died. Immediately after that day of his funeral, actually, I tried heroin for the first time. So I don't want to blame it on his death and say, yeah, this is why I was an addict, but that's how I chose to cope. So kind of what I wanted to, do here, besides just telling my story and kind of more about me, is kind of stress the importance of coping with trauma. And a lot of, actually, I would say most addicts, if I had to look, I didn't look up the stats, but most, if not all addicts, are addicts due to some kind of trauma, or have trauma in their past. So it's really important that we find other avenues to cope with this. It's so important. It's life or death now. Alan's ashes are in here. some of them, my little starfish, my Alan. And still years later, this is the outfit that he passed away in. And, it's just a little onesie. And these are little dinosaur booties he had on. And I still smell it. Because it still has that milk smell, the milk smell from like the babies, from the breast milk spilling or whatever. So I still smell it, and then I seal it back up in the bag. And I don't ever want it to lose that smell. But maybe, if anything, I could reach out to other mothers who have lost their babies, even if they didn't become addicts. I would like you to comment and tell me your experiences, and I'm here to talk or give my feedback if anybody needs it. And, we have to reach out to clergy. You can't isolate, and there's so many other avenues to take other than, using drugs to cope. Unfortunately, a lot of us do use that to cope, and we just have to find other ways. The most important thing I would say is not to isolate, and really to get professional help. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't think that was going to help. And now when I, talk to a therapist or talk to my counselor, I meet with my counselor every other Wednesday, and it's an amazing outlet for me, So talking does help, especially to like a counselor, a trained professional. Trauma can lead to mental health. Trauma can lead to addiction. We've got to learn to cope with it, and we've got to be more outspoken as a society, and have more outreach for people that have experienced trauma. I have like 3 friends who've lost their babies as well, and it's just crazy. They're all addicts. So, I mean, and, they didn't lose their babies because of addiction. They were triggered into addiction because of the loss of their babies, because of that direct trauma. So, hopefully, I touched somebody today, and if not, now you just know a little bit more about me. And I'll see you guys next week, or if you have any ideas, as always, for topics that you'd like to see me talk about, please leave a comment. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and hit the alert button. And please comment. I'd love to hear from you guys. Please. Thank you. Have a great week, guys.